Welcome to this edition of Diligence Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, and I'll be your host for today's show. Today, we're going to be talking about the top challenges facing boards in 2022. And joining me, as she usually does, is Maria Moats, who's the leader of PwC's Governance Insight Center. Welcome, Maria.
Thanks, TK. Good to be here.
It is a wonderful time of the year, not just because of the holidays, but because we get to project what the biggest issues will be in 2022. So every year we sort of do the same thing, and we're going to continue with that. And I'm going to let you start on what your biggest issue is for boards in 2022, or the most challenging issue.
Sure. First prediction to me. Sounds good. So my prediction is that mandatory ESG disclosures on climate and human capital appear imminent. It's coming. They're not going to go away. And as a reminder, there are several data points here, right? The Center for Audit Quality has told us that the majority of the S&P 500, 95%, already have these public disclosures. And in our own corporate directors survey, 67% of the directors this year told us that they actually prefer the voluntary. They like it this way, right? Only a small percentage, less than 20%, told us that they're okay with mandatory disclosures. So my prediction on eminent mandatory is telling us that as board members, not just audit committee, but full board members should focus on the fact that when it comes to climate, the SEC is really looking at greenhouse gas emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3, trying to get some comparability by industries and companies. The SEC is going to look to add to the human capital disclosures that came last year. Recall that we had some, and now there'll be more specificity, moving from principles-based to more specificity around metrics, around turnover and human capital, around diversity, demographics, and the like. So my prediction is that it is imminent. Mandatory disclosures around climate, human capital are in 22 here to stay.
Well, I certainly wouldn't disagree with that. And I've heard from investors that they would like a say on climate, which would add to say on pay.
Yes.
And sort of give them a stronger voice. And I wouldn't necessarily say that that's going to happen in 2022, but let's just say I wouldn't be surprised if we see a strong push in that direction. So
I would agree with you.
So my first one next year, I think I'm going to say that it's going to be political and legislative environment that's going to be the challenge. And, you know, in the past, the fluctuation in the change of administrations wasn't near as severe as it is in sort of today's time. I look at the SEC and them sort of, you know, recalibrating all of the things that the Trump administration had done. You know, we see universal ballot being discussed back. We see changes in a lot of the regulations, and certainly with the enforcement as well. You look at everything else, you look at corporate taxes, you look at just changes across the board. And if I'm a management team, I start to get, how do we plan for the future when we don't really know what the rules of the game are going to be? So I think it's gotten, and now we have midterms coming up. We don't really know what's going to happen, you know, with the House or the Senate and those. I just think it constantly is a case of flux that is very hard to plan for. So I think that 2022 is going to be especially challenging for corporate boards and corporations. So that would be my first challenge.
Totally agree. Big pendulum swing for sure.
Okay, your turn for number 2.
My turn. I'll give you another one. I think a lot about risk, not just financial reporting, but overall risk. And my next prediction has to do with supply chain. I mean, the reality is supply chain disruptions have reared their ugly head in every industry across all sectors. So as a reminder to boards that a focus on what's happening in the supply chain, how is management thinking about those risks and how they're mitigating those risks, the how is very important, because my prediction is we're going to continue to live in this world of volatility around sourcing of goods and ultimately getting it to the consumer. As I know, since I need to do my holiday shopping for my children, and I'm going to physically go gather gifts as opposed to even try to rely on as much as I did in the past on online.
Well, again, we don't have to look very far to see, what has happened to date. And, I don't know how long it's going to take for that backlog at the ports to work out. And then there's the issue of just ports. When you see how China has built up their port system and whatever, I think it's something that our infrastructure, I'm certainly glad that we're looking at infrastructure, because I think it's something that for the first time we are falling behind on. And infrastructure does relate to supply chain in some way. So I think I couldn't agree more that and just other risks. One of the risks that you don't think about much is the speed of information. Okay.
Right. And
how fast you have to make a decision in today's world versus 5 years ago. Exactly. So risk management is one of the key responsibilities of the board. So it's safe to say that that's always going to be a challenge for boards.
Absolutely.
So my next one is what I call sort of the forgotten challenge, and that's digital transformation. Now, before the pandemic and before the surge in ESG and the Floyd situation and diversity and equality in the workplace, before that really sort of started to surge, the two issues that were challenges when this show was done previously was digital transformation and cyber risk. Mm-hmm. With all that's happened, those have sort of been pushed aside a little bit. And I want to say that digital transformation, companies that are not ahead of the curve on that are going to find themselves looking up at their competition, because that is still a critically important issue to address as your company. It does relate to board composition in a way, because there's probably a lot of board members that did not have to deal with digital transformation in their work life.
Right.
So it causes them to pick up, speed on making sure that they're staying ahead of the curve. So that would be my second.
I love that one. I have another one for you, though. Staying with just the theme of what can be really big. So in 2021, talent. I mean, can we talk about workforce and talent anymore in 21? And my prediction for 22 is that we will continue to talk about talent, because it is the thing that's changed quite significantly with this pandemic. The directors in our annual corporate directors survey this year told us that talent was their number one issue above strategy. So it tells you that people are leaning in. It's super important. I will also tell you that when you talk to people about how they want to work, it's all over the map. We did a survey to see how you wanted to work in terms of hybrid, come back to the office. When I say all over the map, I mean it literally. 19% told us, oh, we want to go full remote. But 22% told us, oh, we want to come to the office. Somewhere in the middle is the 3 days and 2 days. So why this matters to boards is that you really need to understand with data how management is looking at bringing in talent into the organization, retaining that talent. What are the dashboards that they will be providing the board to really keep you informed? Talent at all levels, it really matters. And what are those disruptions in talent manifesting themselves in terms of risk for the organization? So my prediction is that we'll continue to talk about talent, hybrid, the great resignation, and so on and so forth. Last thing I'll tell you, I thought it was interesting. I looked at a stat that said that, and it's Census Bureau stats. Before the pandemic, only 6% of us knew what it meant to work from home. 3/4 of us would just go to work. This is hugely disruptive for us.
Well, I think boards, to your point, better be ready to throw out the traditional ways of recruiting and retaining your workforce. Okay. It's just, going to be turned upside down. Disruption is the best word you can say for what it is. And those organizations that don't adapt with the times and listen to what their workforce is saying is really going to be behind the 8 ball. And I really feel sad for small business. Okay. Most of the times, the things that we discuss on this show are related to large corporations. But when you get back to even the small publics or the private organizations, this workforce issue is just chronic. Okay. And it's forcing people out of business. I know in the community that I live in, there are restaurants closing right and left because they just can't get the help to stay open. And I think that's sad, and it's going to have an impact on the economy because the lifeblood is those small businesses and private businesses that keep the economy going. So, I think, Maria, we could spend at least another hour going back and forth talking about all the things that happened. But I think this is a good start for people to think about. And I think lastly, and I'm sure I share your thoughts on this, we want to thank and wish a happy holidays to all the people that we've had a chance to touch this past year, and hope that 2022 brings a sort of a brighter light and maybe the chance for us to get together personally more than what has happened, because everybody I talk to really misses that opportunity to get together, whether it's a board, whether it's somebody onboarding, whether it's just a company picnic. The fact that we can't get together is sort of sad. So I'm sure you'll join me in wishing everybody a happy holiday. And I want to thank you for all your support and PwC support during the year. We really appreciate it. And we're looking forward to a great 2022.
Thank you, TK, and happy holidays to everyone.
Yeah. And that will conclude our year-end show. And we hope you enjoyed the experience. So we will be back again next year when we take another look at critical topics that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.